Hello and welcome to SaaS Showdown, another episode as we get to the end of this season. My name is Colin McCarthy, and once again I am joined by...
Hey everybody, I'm Layton.
Hey Rose, good to see you again. We have a very special episode today.
Yes, we do.
The start of a new format that we're going to work on more in the next series of episodes we do next season when we do a revamp and a refresh. We have a special guest today.
We do. Everybody, please welcome our friend Colleen.
Hi.
Colleen, do you want to introduce yourselves to the listeners?
Yeah. I am Colleen Alaimo. No one knows how to say my last name, so that's how you say it. So yeah, I am here super happy to see Colin and Rose again. I'm senior IT manager at a unicorn company now, Kin, but I have been in tech for over 20 years and came up as a woman in tech when there's not many of us, and have just grown my career since then, been all over the place.
So that is great. And that is going to be a wonderful thing to talk about is, women in tech and your trajectory, your career, and how that's gone. And it's great to see you again. We haven't seen you for a while. We were all part of another online community. So it's good to be back here and discussing that. And I'll ask, how did you start in, if I do the maths, 2003?
Yeah. Thanks for telling people my age.
2004. Wait a minute.
It's 2024
did we roll over? Oh, man. We'll fix that in post.
Yeah, actually, I was in sales prior to being in tech, and the company I was at laid my entire department off on my birthday. And my dad had a friend that was CTO at the university I was going to, and completely random, he never invited him to anything before, invited my birthday party at his house, and he's like, hey, I've seen you in the computer lab. You can fix printers. You can talk to people. This is when IT was like, just the people in the basement that didn't talk to people. He's like, I need someone that can interpret to students and faculty and staff to IT. You want a job and your tuition's half off? I'm like, yes.
That sounds like a great, a great offer. Yeah.
And I recently changed my major from culinary arts and poli-sci to business, and now I'm in tech, which is weird. And that's how I got started.
So what were your first responsibilities and induction into tech?
Just answering the phones, trying to help people, listening to our developers and other staff, and telling people, trying to interpret and calm the faculty down and some of the students.
That's so funny, Colin, because I also started when I was in school. And so it was my work study job. And I think that was one of the things too, that we as student employees served as is we were really that interface between the people and IT, because mostly IT, they worked on their computers all day. They ran around with flash drives doing God knows what. And they just obscured a lot of their work. But we needed somebody who actually, picked up the phone and talked to people who walked in who were kind of stressed or whatever. And did that kind of work. But that's how I got started too. So that's funny.
And I was going to school part-time, so I was full-time there. But it was...
Yeah, it's amazing how important those soft human skills actually are in IT, and certainly in IT support. When I started in IT in 97 on a telephone help desk, a large percentage of the people on the desk were female, were women. It was almost like a 50-50 split. And when I talked to, I was, in a batch of new hires, and there was probably 70% women in the group. And I talked to the manager about it, and he said, well, we hire people who have good people skills. And that is, generally, the female side of the world's makeup. And they said, we can always teach them the technical skills. One thing you can't do is teach it's even harder to teach a very technical person, that human softer skill side. So
that's interesting. So Colleen, I wanted to ask you, because this is something that I've thought about, and obviously I reflect on it everywhere I work. I guess over the course of your career, what has been the makeup of women on your team, from all the way back in the early days to now?
early days, I was one of the only women, and then when I was interviewing for jobs, like I was told like I am the best candidate, but they didn't want to hire me but they couldn't hire me because I would disrupt the team because some of the guys back then didn't know how to talk to girls. And like my first job, I had this one guy,
That's
Paul, who I would say
horrifying.
hi
Oh
to
my
every day.
God.
That's horrifying.
He was afraid to say hi to me because he didn't know how to talk to women. And like I finally broke him down, and we are friends to this day. But
Wow.
That sounds like a scene from a comedy.
Yeah.
I was going to say, yeah,
realize
that's
that
very much like a scene from the IT crowd. Yeah.
yeah, it was yeah. And then, the best I did with hiring and like gender diverse, not just women, but gender diversity was at my first startup back in 2013. Went from a team of all white dudes to a pretty diverse team, and more than half were women, and more than half were every other touch point of diversity. It was great.
Now, so were you managing that team and therefore in charge of the hiring, or was that okay? That wasn't like a top-down decision. That was like like I'm joining this team and I am making these changes. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for that, especially when you're on a team that's growing, right? Because you have the opportunity. You're not necessarily there to replace people. You're adding people, and so you have
that was all
a
ads.
better time with it.
All ads.
Yeah. I think it gets a little bit touchier when you join a team that's not really growing. It's very stable. And you are one of the only women. And there's not really a lot of opportunity to change that.
You have to make a conscious effort of like, I'm not just hiring women, I'm hiring the best person for the job. And the best person for the job just happens to be a woman or someone more diverse.
So this is something that I've had some trouble with in the past, is like I've definitely been on the team that's hiring, and we're just not getting female applicants, or we're not getting diverse applicants at all, really. Right. So like, I guess like what's been your experience with that? And like, how have you tried to combat that?
Yeah. So like this last position that I was hiring for, she was put out an offer last week and she accepted. So I'm very excited, but over close to 1,000 applicants for women. Most of those women were not qualified. One had a background in marketing. One ran a horse stable. And I'm like, I can't even try to. But I asked my recruiter, I'm like, dude, can you go out and like recruit and find people?
Just to like put them in the pool, right? Because you want to be able to.
Yeah.
Let's
not just rely on the people that are applying.
It is incredibly difficult when you are recruiting to find that diverse balance of candidates that you want to be, cautious of, aware of, give everybody an equal chance. And it is, I've struggled with that, and the female applicants that I've seen come through have been absolutely amazing. And as you know, and their resume CV will land on your desk. You'll say to the recruiter, quickly snap them up. Let's get some interviews in. 36 hours, 3 days will pass in the whole process, and then you hear back, oh no, they're already deep into the process with another company.
I've had a lot of experiences like that, where you're like, you find one that you're really interested in interviewing, and then like it turns out, they're almost done with another process somewhere else, and somebody is like fast tracking them.
Yeah.
Have you seen? So obviously, you've seen a change in the balance and the makeup of people in the last 20 years. I've seen it an awful lot, and certainly in SaaS. And I think IT used to be very physical. We used to have to lift up 100-pound servers, rack them into, or 70-pound CRTs. CRT, for those listening in black and white, is a very old television. It's almost like a television on monitor. It's not these flat screens you had today. It was thick and deep, and they were incredibly heavy. And if you were, I used to work in education, we would refit a new IT suite. You get 100 monitors delivered, and they were 70 pounds each. You've got to carry them up a flight of stairs. It was very, very physical. Improvements in technology, lighter computers, laptops, LCDs, flat screens, SaaS. We're not racking servers. Do you think that technology has also helped change the balance and brought more females into the industry?
I think in other parts of tech, I see a lot more female engineers. I see a lot more
Mhm.
female like PMOs and other places. IT, in the last 10 years, I've seen a big drop off in that.
Really?
Yeah.
I do feel like it's been kind of stagnant. Like personally for me, like I agree with you. Like in other places in tech, like we're seeing like a lot more growth of like, you know, women choosing to enter those fields and enter those careers. I think some of that's contributed to, you know, like the availability of like boot camps and things like that are
Hmm.
like very focused. But I think that's also, I don't know, like women like to make money too. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
um, but I do feel like I like IT operations is a field that's still just like it's not getting that same kind of attention,
Right.
not that same level of attention. Um, like Colleen, I don't know if you've joined any like women in tech kind of groups, right? Like you can join them, sure. But they don't often tend to have like a very solid component of like women who do the kind of work that we do, right? Like
Right.
software administration and IT strategy and like
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
There are a ton of Scrum Masters.
There's also a ton of people who do Salesforce admin, I will
Yes.
say. So
Yeah.
Salesforce is
Do you
doing
think
okay.
that might have come from the traditionally sales side or the CSM side? The one part of tech that
It's possible.
I've always seen is customer success managers, account managers, account execs are
Are predominantly female.
Every SaaS company that I've bought a piece of software from, the team that
I've had a couple
I've had a couple,
yeah.
but 90% of, and maybe it does stem back to those, you know, soft skills, those human skills.
They're looking for people who can talk to other people, right? I do think the Salesforce admin is kind of an interesting one because I think it's possible, that there's a bridge. It's also possible that Salesforce is making those certifications really available to people, and so they're easier for women to get. But yeah, I don't really understand what that is because I think on my first IT team was about I went to a women's college, to be fair. So like the diversity on my first IT team was far beyond what you would normally expect. But the actual like professional IT team that wasn't those students was about half and half. But the half that was female tended to be your like I think one was like the Drupal person, like she managed the website.
I used to love Drupal back in the day.
Managed the website. We had somebody who managed the phone systems. Like they were very like specific focused software administrative roles, and I think that's interesting because like the networking guys were all male. The guys who dealt with like the labs, the computer labs and stuff, all male. Like, yeah.
Oh yeah, and I remember like back then we were building a new building on campus, and like you were talking about CRTs and how heavy the computers were. If the guys were carrying one or two, I was trying to carry 3 or 4 because I had to be better and prove myself.
Colleen's competitive.
I knew I had to prove myself to be like one of them.
But yeah, no, I think I don't know. I do think it has been stagnant. I don't know what really the cause of that is. I encourage people all the time to like become an IT person, like, because I think it's been really great. Colleen, you said your background's in business, right? Which obviously is not, it's related to what you do, but it's not what you do. Yeah. I was a women's and gender studies major, which has absolutely no bearing on how I do my work. I won't say it has no bearing. I do use it to write papers.
And before business, culinary arts and poli-sci. So like I was just all
so many people do a college degree in one subject and then obviously pivot and do something completely different. One of my colleagues had a physical ed. He wanted to be a gym teacher and got all that qualification and then pivoted to be a computer analyst.
I've actually known a lot of people who like came into IT from film. Like
Okay.
they did film studies and theater studies, and
Mm-hmm.
you move into AV and then you move into IT from there.
Yeah.
I have also known people, I mean, so obviously like we know like I think the major the major funnels for IT people are Apple,
Right. Yeah.
Genius Bars. And I would say telecom customer support people.
Yeah. Verizon, AT&T.
Like I
Yeah.
worked at Verizon for a while. I've known people who worked at
Yeah.
AT&T and T-Mobile, like all of those. Like I feel like they funnel people into our
Yeah.
career
That's
because it's very easy to go from like supporting on a very narrow basis like that to supporting
yeah.
much
Yeah.
broader.
So obviously it's those soft skills
Yeah.
again. Colleen, you talked a bit about the interview process, or getting a huge number of resumes, but only a very small percentage being females. What would be a sort of a recommendation, guidance you would give to a young person who's listening, wants to get into IT, wants to change their career in IT? What should they be learning? What are the desired skills? What's going to get their resume correctly noticed?
Internships, get an internship on a help desk. Also, like have on your resume, I am my family's IT support person. One person's
Yeah.
resume that I hired a while ago, like had an entire paragraph. Like I'm switching careers. I didn't like what I majored in. I have been I help my grandparents learn how to use email. Like
That's actually that's a really good one because I think that's something that like a lot of people have,
yeah,
but they don't really know if they can list it, right?
right.
Like who's thinking out there like, oh, I do my entire family's IT support, but like, yeah, that's a marketable skill.
Yeah.
You can just say that on your resume, or you can say it in your cover letter or whatever. Like, I think especially for people who are looking to switch, you have to look for all of the ways that your career now or your life now fits into the new career, and that's a really good call out because doing IT support for your
Takes a lot of
grandparents
patience.
It
is
takes
the
a set of
same
skills,
as doing IT support for your colleagues.
especially when you're dealing with salespeople or executives sometimes.
Yes, yeah. You need kid gloves, and also you need to
Yes,
be
yeah, and
very
you
patient.
can't assume anything.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, that's so funny. That's so funny. Because yeah, I think every IT person I know, unless they also have another IT person in their family, does IT support for their family.
That's why
100%.
I had to move.
100%.
100%.
I got fed up. I got fed up with doing it.
You were like, I'm not doing this anymore.
I'm thinking of moving back to near my family, but
Yeah, no, I offer free IT consulting basically to all of my friends and family. It's just one of those things. People come to me and they're like, do I need to do
Yes.
two-factor authentication? And I'm like, yes. Yes,
yeah.
you
It's good
do.
you've mentioned.
My dad's Christmas present from me was finally using a password manager and letting me get him enrolled with security keys.
Wow.
That's pretty big.
That was I'm like, that's all I want for Christmas, Dad.
That
I
is very
know.
good. It is, it is very sad and worrying seeing the number of stories about elderly people being compromised. I know of 3 elderly people who have had portions of their bank account drained through phishing. So it does
Oh
Yeah,
happen,
yeah.
it's really bad.
and there's no recourse whatsoever.
And it's nicer for it's nice this is like even another reason to come into IT. It's because like
Yes.
if you're worried about your parents or your grandparents or whoever in your life that is just not it is very likely to fall for one of those things. You could be the de facto person that they text message with like,
Yeah.
"Hey, is this legit?"
Yeah.
Yeah, and
That's
lend
the
yourself
story
some
for a
credibility by
separate
having a real career in it.
That's a story for a separate podcast.
Yeah, yeah.
Obviously we know what keeps us worried about our parents and our grandparents. What keeps you worried in the current IT climate, and what do you see happening in 2024?
just social engineering and companies not taking security seriously as it checks a box, but not wanting the executive level, not wanting it to interfere with business or with sales or with growth. Like when I was at the DNC, my CSO gave me one requirement. Hey, we're bringing on like 3,000 to 4,000 people in a couple of months. Like within a couple of months, we're hiring 3,000 to 4,000 people. I need you to be able to say every single person was trained in cybersecurity prior to getting their credentials. And I need you to be able to testify to that in front of Congress if something happens.
Wow.
What?
Yep. And I was able to do that. I put together a whole program. I had a separate IT onboarding team.
I was going to say, so prior to receiving their accounts, yeah.
So first they would have to go through roll call on the security training, and the security team would scare them and teach them how to make good passwords and enroll and tell them about security keys. And then we would have 3 to 4 different onboardings happen at the same time because I had like 10 people doing them. With 30, I'm like, they cannot have more than 30 people in an onboarding because that gets too confusing.
And we're doing onboarding classes of 30.
We were doing like 9 onboarding classes of 30 a day, and enrolling them and getting them in their security keys. But like I was able to say with full confidence, every single one of these people were trained in security prior to getting credentials.
That's the way to do it. When
I would love if every company did it.
That's the way to do it. If it has to be so robust that you might have to testify in front of Congress, it's a shame every company doesn't operate in that sort of standard, right. to get their security training.
I was going to say, I would imagine there's a few tech companies out there that wish they had planned as though they were going to have to testify in front of Congress.
Yeah. It's interesting that.
So it's like, let's not worry about salespeople selling on day one. Let's get them trained properly.
Yeah.
And then get them.
I think that's a good idea too, because like everybody knows like that first week of work is really just about like orienting you to the company and all of this stuff. So why wouldn't you also just like strongly start orienting people to how they should do their work here?
Yeah. And it just takes an extra hour. That's it. Security training, is that onboarding? Than getting them into their computers. That's it.
A previous large company where I was at, I don't think you had to do it when somebody joined, but it was done like every December before the end of the year. That's when they would send out the links for all of the little cartoon demos you'd have to watch.
But think about all the stuff you could have destroyed before you had to take it. Like if you started in January.
They've already chosen a bad password and they're not going to reset it. And they're going to keep going with whatever for every password reset, whatever their pattern is that they've used for every place that they've ever worked.
Well, and so Colleen, you've worked at a fairly diverse group of places. So you think that social engineering and like, especially people at the executive level, not taking it seriously enough, like you think that that's still like a very widespread problem. I think we're hearing in the news, right, that it's like getting better, right? That like people are starting to take notice, but like,
it's still a problem. Especially like executives, and honestly, like we're constantly hiring a ton of salespeople because we have a product to sell, and they're not. Let's be honest, salespeople are not the most technical. They're often the hardest to onboard. They have a lot of questions. I always ask them like, make sure you have your Wi-Fi password before onboarding, and like inevitably there's one or two. Oh, I have to call my grandson. I don't know how to get on.
Oh, because they're all onboarding remotely.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, that adds to the challenge.
I was going to say, so how do you think remote onboarding has changed that experience?
So everywhere that I've went, it was not good. Everywhere after I've been there for a while, I've made it better because I went from we don't send a password through Okta or anything on day one. It's join from your personal computer. Okay, who has their computer? Now open it up. Now turn it on. Now connect to Wi-Fi. Is everyone connect to Wi-Fi? Raise your hand when you're connected to Wi-Fi.
Actually, yeah, I think that's the onboarding process I used when I started at Stripe. At the time, I thought it was very strange because I was like, "What do you mean I can't log into my new computer yet?" And they were like, no, you need to join a call from your personal device.
If you think about the pre-remote days, that's what happened.
It would be in a
You got
conference
your
room.
computer.
Yeah.
You're in a room. Yes.
Yeah. That's
So
interesting.
really bring us back to that.
Yeah, it's interesting you've thought about that, because I haven't, in my roles and responsibilities in the last few years, haven't really had to think about that. And I onboarded with a new company back in October, and I got sent a Chromebook. Obviously, I know what my Wi-Fi password is. I set it. It's very long. People are freaked out that I can remember it. Just typed it in, and away I went.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's good. It's one of those human skills that the women have over men for thinking of that complexity. The things that we might
But also,
overlook,
like
not
getting into dangerous territory, Colin.
yeah, like not knowing what our Wi-Fi password is.
Also, like walking people through every step of the way gives them more. I want and I tell this to my team all the time, like, I want us to be your friendly neighborhood IT crew.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
well, and
you
I
get to
think
know
like when I got my first IT job, one of the tasks I had to do during the interview was I had to write down like to somebody who didn't know what a sandwich was, like how to make a PB&J sandwich.
Yes.
And it's an exercise that I've heard like other people like have had too, right? But I also think it's one of those things that like is probably lacking from what we consider like old school IT, right? Like they didn't ever have to do that. They didn't ever have to like explain to somebody who had no idea how to do the thing, right? Like it was more like, stay in your corner, get it done. If it works, great. If it doesn't, fix it.
And for, future people I hire, this is my go-to question is, I want you to take a minute, think about it, and then take 5 minutes to teach me something. It could be how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. It could be anything. Teach me something. And that's, how do you explain a thing to someone that doesn't know anything? And I've gotten some crazy answers. Like,
I was
really
going to say that sounds like
yeah.
it would go a lot of different ways. Do you have like one example that like really stands
interested.
out?
So one of my favorites was guy pulled out his violin. And it was like, this is how
he had it with him.
He had it with him because it was in person. Had his violin, and he's like, here's violin chords. I'm like, only wrong answer I ever got was, I don't know if I can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the wrong answer.
Yeah, you can. No. There's always something can be explained. So
yeah. Even if you think the person knows it already, like you can try and teach them.
Yeah. So and you everything gets reinforced when you go through that explanation, and that's what we do in IT. Hundreds of times.
Yes. Exactly.
I always liked explaining how networks work, how DHCP works and ARP requests and all of the other stuff, and packets, frames. That's all very interesting. So incredibly nerdy, though. Incredibly nerdy thinking about that, but it does help with the divide and conquer for fault finding. So talking of faults, what would you say? And I love this question. I've been asked it a number of times. What's the biggest mistake that you're publicly willing to share, or story that you've made? And I always like this because we often learn from these the best. What's the biggest mistake? I'll tell you quickly my first and biggest mistake. It happened in like 2002, 2003. Ran out of space on my 20 gig hard disk. So I bought a 100 gig hard disk, and I copied all my files from the 20 gig hard disk to the 100 gig hard disk, and then was going to reformat that 20-inch disk and make it my operating system and have the 100 as the data. Plugged my Windows XP CD in, thought I'd selected the right drive, went through, formatted it, did everything. Booted up, went to look at the C drive. There was my 100 gig C drive and a 20 gig secondary drive. I'd accidentally put Windows XP on the drive that I wanted to have, that I'd copied all my data from. So I'd forgotten.
Deleted all your stuff.
I deleted all of my stuff, and I was devastated, realized there was nothing I could do, and I just had to move on. And I've learned at that stage what I should have done was disconnect the drive that I didn't want to touch with the operating system. So, and I've become a lot better since then for like double checking, and certainly if you're making those real critical, like, there is no going back actions, that you double check exactly what you're doing. And I would often in work get a colleague on the call, and we would go through things together, just so there was another pair of eyes. So
Yeah. So one of the startups I was at, we paid a company to revamp our entire branding, website, everything. And I was supposed to do the migration over a weekend, and I got busy and forgot. It was right when I met my former husband. Got busy, forgot. We spent the weekend on the boat instead of doing that. And I knew they had a meeting with a major investor, so I decided to do it Monday morning. Our website was down for 4 hours.
Ooh.
On a Monday. Yep.
On a Monday. It was not good. I did not get fired. I owned up to it, but it was.
Yeah.
I was thankful. I mean, they should have fired me. I would have been okay with that. Like,
yeah, nothing should be done Monday morning.
Also, nothing should be done last minute. Like I think migrations like that should happen well in advance of an important meeting.
They definitely should.
Yeah.
This needs to be done, and it's not going to take nearly as long as I know it will.
Yeah, things always take longer. And nowadays, a change like that would probably happen very, very easily, because it's so easy to spin up a secondary instance, and then you just change. And also DNS, back 10 years ago, 20 years ago, DNS would take 2 days to update. Now it happens in 20 seconds.
You just shorten the time.
Right.
Yeah.
So you can see it changes very, very quickly. So that's a good one.
I think that's a good example too of how the technology has improved to the point that those things don't happen anymore. Like, that's the good thing, is like, for every bad thing that you do because you didn't realize it was going to take that long, or you missed your window, or like, just like you misclicked the wrong thing. Like, now there are a lot more fail safes or like things have improved to the point that like we don't have these problems anymore, which is what it's all about.
And I also would have pushed back more, like, now that I know what's going on and like knew what would happen, of like, okay, go through that meeting. Don't make me do this in the middle of it just because you want our logo to look different.
Yeah. Like, it'll be okay. I think they'll live.
They probably by now that they've been bought, sold, rebranded, spun off.
None of it matters.
No. So
they no longer exist, not because of the website, but many other reasons.
Lastly, as we get to the tail end, the close of our podcast, I'd love to find out what you're excited about in the coming years with tech, and certainly with automations and AI.
Yeah, we know what tech is excited about.
Obviously, Google's Duet AI got rebranded the other day to Gemini. This will date this podcast when it comes out, but AI is still the big new thing.
But what is your big new thing, Colleen?
Honestly, I'm excited about my company and the growth. It's ridiculously amazing. But with the new thing with tech is like, going with AI, and like, I'm constantly trying to find different ways to utilize AI, and like, have not done it here yet because we've had a lot going on. But at my previous place, I use a bunch of different AI bots and everything into our ticketing system, so that 90% of our tickets were closed with AI, and so my team can focus on the real work and the cool things we want to do.
I've used AI and machine learning actually to help reduce the ticket load by basically just like answering all those super fast questions. I think that's a big deal. That's a big deal.
And the better it gets, the more human touch it feels.
Yeah, Colleen, what was the ticketing system?
We were using JSM, Jira Service Management.
Oh,
which
right.
was really hard to integrate.
I was hoping
AI
you would say
into
Fresh Service.
was
I'm a big Fresh Service
really
fan. They have some
Yeah.
I'm
AI.
sure Fresh Service has some of those
they have
bots.
Fresh Service
some
is a
AI
lot
components.
better.
So yeah.
I know Zendesk does too, but they cost a pretty penny.
We do. But they're so great.
Yeah. I will say I know AI is new, but on a personal level, or like, you know, just observing, like I think it still costs kind of a lot right now.
Yeah.
It's very expensive.
In
some cases, AI add-ons to a service cost twice as much as the service.
Yes. If you're looking at Copilot, which is like $35 extra, Duet or Gemini is I think 20 or something, 25. Certainly on even if you're adding it on a personal account, on your Gmail account with Google One, I do think. I never liked when I had a budget to manage. I never liked spending money, but now using it and seeing how helpful it is, I would advocate and I would allocate money for it in my budget because it is getting really good at helping and make things faster, more streamlined.
Yeah. I think the only thing is it can be hard to train people to use it, you know? Like Colleen, you were saying that you are trying to find new ways to use it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think like I personally am too, right? I'm trying to find new ways to use it in my life and like figure out whether it can justify the price tag, right? Because the more you use something, the better justification you have. Right. But I like when I think about trying to train, for example, our accountants, you know, or I think a salesperson maybe is a little bit easier of a sell because they have to write emails a lot. They have to like build decks a lot. Like I think for them, the use cases are a little bit more natural. But like, yeah, when you like look over at like, you know, your accounting group or you look over at your lawyers, it's more like, what are they going to get out of it?
I think technically, I think the lawyers will get a lot out of it because MML is very good with actual words. Accountants will you can't do as much with the data values with the numerical value, so they might not get out as much at the moment, but that will change over the course of time. But it is very good at creating guides.
Imagine a day when we just like have a set of data and then you can just tell the AI like, here's what I want to know from the thing. I think we talked about this actually in a previous episode where we were going over some Google Sheets stuff. And I was like, I wish it did more. That's what AI is supposed to be doing, right?
Right. But I mean, I have to say, I even went simple and like ChatGPT. I just put in like my major accomplishments and I use ChatGPT to write my self-appraisal.
Yeah, that's good.
Me.
Oh, nice. So like, it like really, that's tedious too. I hate doing those.
Yeah.
That's actually a good pro tip. Use it to help write your self-review that you have to do.
Get done out the door.
I've got a really good last. That's good. I got a really good potentially last question for us. Going back to our spicy episode, Rose, our most watched episode.
Yes.
What
still is the most watched episode?
Yes, it is. Click like and subscribe. Colleen, what is the piece of tech that you absolutely hate? Could be a software,
but you may or may not be able to get away from.
Yeah, it could be a software service, could be a printer, could be a laptop.
Yeah, what's something you have to use, but
Jira Service Management.
Yes. Jira was on that episode.
Oh
yes. That's the thing. I've used it so much. It's terrible.
It's everywhere. And like my current company, like migrating everyone to Jira. And I'm like,
but do we have to? Colin's been very lucky. He hasn't had to interact with Jira very much, but
No.
oh my
There's
goodness.
so
Yes,
many
I feel the
better
same. I feel the
things.
same.
And even just like licensing, like we wanted to add a couple licenses. You can't just add it in your instance. I have to go to the salesperson who then tries to add a million other things. And it took me 3 weeks to get a quote for 10 more licenses.
Wow.
Like,
It's bad service.
why? Just why?
For the salespeople who might be listening to this, that's not what we want. If we asked
No.
you for 10 licenses, we want 10 licenses. You can table
Exactly.
the other stuff for later.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And that is interesting that it is, again, one of the most hated pieces of software out there. Well, which means that there is...
And yet we can't get away from it.
No, but because
No.
it means that there's an opportunity for change. And it only takes, a few companies, small companies, to start making a change. One development team, Shadow IT comes in, a bunch of developers like, I hate Jira, let's do our tickets and our whatever you do in Jira in a different platform.
I hate
Yeah.
people who want to be in Techstars. Develop something else.
Yeah.
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 So
It's ripe for disruption, always.
Yes.
let's hope it's here by the end of 2024.
Yeah.
That's a really aggressive timeline.
Yeah.
Colin.
That's it.
You could do all the coding in ChatGPT.
In ChatGPT. There you
Gen
go.
AI. It'll be fine.
Practically writes it for you.
Yeah. You'll just have to say, "Okay, computer, direct all the power to the front."
Build me an enterprise ticketing system.
Yeah. It'll be sorry, enterprise. You mean Star Trek ticketing system? That's what it'll do.
Yes.
So, yeah.
I'm gonna put that prompt into ChatGPT later, and I'll let you know what it says.
Better ticketing system.
I'll put the same one into Gemini and see what it says as well. So.
Great.
Yeah.
We'll compare
Or
notes.
Bard or Gemini. Whatever, Bard's now renamed Gemini as well. So forget
Oh,
this.
it's Bard Gemini too.
Bard-
That's what they did. They merged them.
Yeah.
It's Duet and Bard, and now they're Gemini together.
Yes. Yeah.
My gosh. Okay. Well, Colleen, it was lovely to see you. I know it's been a
Nice.
while. Let's make sure it's
It
not a
has.
while until the next time.
Yep.
And to all of our listeners at home, thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thanks.